I started. Hello. Today I'm going to be going through a book that I bought, and what I can only describe as a let's play of a book. I have no idea what to fucking call this, but I bought a book called How to Draw Fantasy Art and RPG Maps. Step-by-step cartography for gamers and fans. It's written and illustrated by Jared Blando. Jared Blando was one of the artists in one of the Dungeons and Dragons. Jared Blando, one of the Dungeons and Dragons handbooks. Where's his Wikipedia page? It's bullshit. Oh, he was a Pathfinder guy. Yeah. Anyway, Jared Blando is really cool. His illustrations are fucking sick. I would recommend you look into him a little bit. But this book is fantastic. And it's a really cool read. I've read through the entire thing. I made a few maps. They were pretty terrible, but that's because I haven't practiced. That was my first run. So I'm going to give the whole book another run through again, but this time I'm going to record it. But yeah, let's get started. I'm going to skip over the introduction. Just a bit about my setup real quick. I'm using Macromedia. Fuck me, that's not what it's called anymore. It hasn't been Macromedia in like 8 years. Adobe Flash, Adobe Animate. Jesus, I'm all over the place. For no reason other than I'm comfortable with it. I have been using, I've used this since it was Flash, since it was Macromedia Flash back in like 2004. I've been using it every version so far since then. You're welcome to use Photoshop, you're welcome to use whatever. The guy actually wrote this for people using pen and paper, so by all means do that as well. Step 1, or rather Chapter 1, I'm sorry. Chapter 1, Building Your World. Whether you are partial to dark, deep forests, tall mountains, or vast plains, this chapter will teach you the techniques to bring your vision of a fictional world to the page using your pencils and imagination. We will cover some of the basic methods of laying in various elements that will make up your fantastical world. Maps often consist of a multitude of elements that convey information to an onlooker. Rivers, hills, mountains, cities, and such are all parts of a successful and interesting map, though a balance of these elements is always a good thing. Having a strong idea of the lands you wish to draw is great, but don't be afraid to look at the many historical maps that exist to give you further inspiration for your own map. Most maps are based on functionality, so keep this in mind when laying out yours. A functional fantasy map is more believable and therefore more exciting and inspiring. Using various pencils to sketch and draw, soon you will have a world of your own coming to life. I'm going to start right at step number 1. So this is when you're defining your continents, your shapes of your land masses and shit. So step 1, as I've highlighted up there, is, that looks like a fucking 6. Let's try that again. There we go. Step 1 is to doodle. You're just going to pick a line and you're going to draw it. You're going to just draw and draw. And that's pretty basic, right? And if you don't like it, you just kind of like cut pieces out of it and add pieces to it. And do this and do that or whatever. Almost all of my maps that I draw, and I'm not quite sure why, but they've always got this inlet in either the east coast or the southeast coast. I don't know why I like that feature so much, but I really do, and none of my maps are good, so I would like to actually have one good map that follows this, so that's what I'm going to be doing. But this is step 1. That's done. Step 1 is just to make a very, very rough outline of what you want. I'm going to move up to step number 2 here. Once your general shape is done, go back in with an HB pencil, or in my case, a new layer in your digital editing program, and refine your original line so it's more detailed. Don't be afraid to be creative or stray radically from your original line. Try to make your coastlines fun and interesting. Once you've finished your darker and more detailed line, erase your light sketch. So what we're going to do to erase is I'm just going to hide the layer when we're done. But basically, this step is to look at your coastline and go, yeah, that's not right. That's not how this coastline works. So you come in and you pull out little features in your island. Right? Give it some waviness, some bays, and some coastlines, shit that you see. Don't be afraid to get a little bold and decide that there is a peninsula. right there. Although I hate that, so, you know, feel free to do it yourself. I just don't like it, so I won't. But yeah, come in like that, and then this, I guess, will be where the peninsula happens. It's going to come up like that, and then we've got this neat little bay. Right? Isn't that cool? Coming up in here, give that little thing right there. I think this is actually what I'm doing right here and right there is a different step, but lo and behold, who really cares? Right, so this right here, this mess right down there, the book says if you want to make that a sharp point, then fuck it, man. Look at that. It's a sharp point now. Feel free to deviate from your original line if you feel. Always go with what your heart tells you to do. Because in the end of the day, a map made with heart is probably going to be better than a map made with procedure. So fuck it, man. That just happens to be the step. So when he says erase the line, I'm just going to hide it. And this is our new outline, which I like a lot better already. So I'm going to lock that layer, and we're going to move on up to step 3. Step 3 is to add islands. Once your basic continent is drawn, look for areas to draw in any islands that may fit in the framework of your map. Islands are often grouped together in bunches of irregular shapes, forming chains that stretch between continental masses. Some are so large that they may form their own small landmass that is totally separate from the mainland. Experiment with shapes and sizes, from short to stout, or long and thin. Just remember that islands are almost always accompanied by other small islands to form island groupings. Again, the illustrations in this book are fantastic and they're very inspiring. If you're ever stuck, just have a look through of all of his art and it will definitely help you think of something. If you have like weird groupings of stuff, it'll look strange, and you just got to use your best judgment. You say, does this look too strange to be believable? You also have to remember that in a fantasy universe, it's very possible that someone erects a perfect square in the ocean. So, do what you want, but be prepared to justify it later. Or don't. Just tell them to fuck off. Your players can deal with it. Big bays like this sometimes have very large islands in them. So yeah, little small island groups form off of the coasts. Islands are caused by tectonic plates moving, or is it Teutonic? Tectonic plates moving underwater and causing a ruckus, making shit poke out when they do that. Like this one goes that way, and then this one will hit it and then go up. And then you've got little islands, you know? So keep that in mind. You don't have to get too technical with it. I just like to know where I'm coming from. So yeah, a note about this. I had an art teacher one time when I was in college who told me that a universal rule of thumb when doodling and when drawing sketches and when, making pieces, not when not doodling and sketching and when making pieces, that particles generally are a good thing. The more particles that you have, the cooler it might look. Like, to me, this group is a little bit more interesting than, say, this guy. Because this guy right here is cool, but he's missing some friends. Right? So, bear in mind that that's a rule of thumb, but it is definitely one that is left up to the artist. I personally don't like to go too crazy, but I like it when other people do. Because I have not mastered particles yet. I'm still very bad at not making it look like shit. This is a judgment portion. You just gotta do your best to, think of what looks best for your map. No. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so feel free to add little offsets from your mainland and to add little coast huggers and the such, and then occasionally that. Usually it's fun, it's interesting to cap off the end of a peninsula with a little island chain. Just for some intrigue, if you look at Florida, it kind of just goes on forever. If you look at Massachusetts, it goes on forever. It just kind of comes off into the water and stuff. Something to think about. Let's carry on. I'm just going to call these islands done for the sake of time. So that is step 3. Let's move to step 4 and put on that. Step 4 is to add lakes. Lakes are what kind of start to really bring out the character in your island or your landmass. And the author says, once your islands are laid in, you should start thinking about laying some lakes on the mainland, or even on your new islands if they're big enough. Lakes are often long and finger-like, since they are depressions that lie in between mountains and hills. Just as with islands, don't be afraid to try all shapes and sizes, or to have multiple lakes grouped near each other. The Great Lakes in America are a good example. So lakes, as he said, are depressions between mountains. So we've got a mountain range here, a mountain range there, and a mountain range there. We're going to probably assume that there's a giant lake somewhere in the middle of them, right? That's generally how it goes. Bear that in mind. You don't have to do this mountainous step first. By all means, do them in any order that you want. Just remember that if you have a lake right here, just for no reason, it might look a little strange if it doesn't have some mountains around it. I actually really like that shape. I'm going to leave it alone. This one's going to be long and finger-like, as the author has described. Alright, and then I'll draw one down here too. Cool. And then one more little one. That blurb he said about having lakes on your islands, pretty fair bet. Let's see. Yeah, I'm fine with that, with my lakes right there. So yeah, just when you're drawing your lakes, bear in mind that usually they rest between mountains, or they're at the foot of a mountain, and something like this area right here could be a mountain range, and that would explain this lake right there, because all the water rushes off of the mountains and fills lakes and shit. It's a depression between valleys and stuff. So just bear that in mind. It'll help your map kind of tell its own story, if it just makes sense geographically. But yeah, that's step 4. Step 4 is good. Let's go to step 5. Step 5 is to create inlets and bays. Now, I had said earlier that I thought I was doing this already, and I definitely was. Step 5 is this shit right here. Like, let's unlock the layer. So step 5 is like these things, little inlets and little bays and shit like that. But I've already done that. You watched me do it. You probably did it along with me, so we might be able to get away with not paying attention to 5, but I'm going to read it anyway. Inlets and bays are a good way of making your coastline very unique. Create some bays by drawing into the interior of your sketch, forming half bowl-like shapes along your coasts. Bays can also be quite irregular, or even contain some small islands to help define them. Don't be afraid to make them a bit more angular or jagged. Inlets are easier, and you can include some by drawing wedges or small pockets that face into your land masses. Be sure to erase the original sketch lines as you form your new coastlines. Yeah, so if you feel the need to, you can go around and start adding little pockets to give your coastline some more, oomph. Just by looking at it right here, I can tell that this stretch right there is probably going to be a cliff. Cliffs of Moher-esque, but not quite, So that's step 5. I'm going to skip it. Feel free to go for it, because I already did it. Alright, 6. Solidify your coastlines. This is for people who are using pen and paper or a digital painting program. In Flash, I could probably get away with filling this and then putting a stroke on it and then just tweaking the stroke, but I'm not even going to do that. I like how it is right now, but I'll read it anyway. 6. Solidify your coastlines. Once you've completely laid out your framework in pencil, it's time to go back and solidify your coastlines. Using an a 2B pencil, trace over your lines, wiggling the pencil a bit to give more detail and character to the original line. Don't be afraid to stray away from your original line or to add more bays, inlets, or islands. After you've darkened up your framework, carefully go back and erase any parts of the original framework that may be showing. Try to leave only your darkened coastlines behind. It really makes a difference to bolden your lines, because if you have these little wimpy shit lines, then it looks wimpy and shitty. So, be bold. Finished coastlines. Once you've finished cleaning up your original light framework, your coastlines should look a lot more completed, and you'll have completed the first step of your fantasy map. So this is the end of Chapter 1. No, it's not. I lied to you. There's a lot more. Alright. That's the end of the continent part. Right? So, this next part, I'm actually going to save for a different video. This one will just be the coastlines. Cool. So that's it for today. I'll do these every now and then. See ya.